I'm speaking with Dr. Tequilla Brownie. She's the CEO of TNTP, and the big mission is to disrupt education inequalities so that America can deliver on its promise of education being the greatest equalizer. Tequilla will share more about her journey. Before TNTP, she spent a decade in Memphis City Schools, where she focused on improving teacher effectiveness. She's also a licensed therapist and a school social worker. In terms of education, Tequilla graduated from Yale with a BA in psychology, a master's in social work from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and a doctorate in educational leadership and policy studies from the University of Memphis. With that, Tequilla, I am so excited about our conversation. What was your upbringing like so that it brought you and influenced you to who you are today?
Yeah, thank you, Analiza, first of all, for inviting me and having me on. It's really an honor to be here and share more about sort of my journey, my lessons learned. My upbringing certainly is a core part of who I am. I would say sort of the intersection of three things: one being Black, one being a female, and then the third being poor in the Deep South, in the Delta. Early on, I knew that my end would not be defined by my beginning. And that message was clear to me from my grandparents who raised me. It was clear to me from my teachers and educators and other adults in my community. People talked to me about, options and choices in life. So I wasn't limited by what I could see in front of me, which was, a lot of poverty, cotton fields, outhouses, things like that. Instead, I actually could see beyond what I could see.
This idea of having your grandparents and your teachers, the community, helping to give you this hope and spark in you that you are not this beginning, that you can be anyone who you want to be. How do we take that, Tequilla, and actually make that real? Because you see what you see, the outhouses and the cotton fields. How do you actually start to think outside the box that there's more out there?
My grandparents, it's interesting, never sat me down and said, oh, you must go to college, right? But they said that education would be the way out. If you don't want to be poor, and I like nice things, they said that education was going to be the way to, access more choices. Poverty removes choices. So I take a very pragmatic view on why education was really important to me. Fortunately, I was a good student, but academics alone isn't good enough. So it was, the combination, I would say, of, yes, making good grades and being a strong student, but also having the supports from both my family, from my teachers, again, not just ensuring that they were, reading, writing, and arithmetic, if you will, but even exposing me to other things and other opportunities to continue to increase my own self-awareness and my own external awareness, right, about sort of the world around me that I didn't even know existed. I never even considered an Ivy League. I literally applied to two colleges. I applied to Yale and I applied to University of Arkansas. And it was interesting, one of my uncles and my guidance counselor, the two people in my life that sort of pushed and said, oh, you really should consider an Ivy League. I'm not saying that that's the path for everyone and has to be. It served me well and was a really great college experience and fit for me. But my point is just to increase the exposure of what the possible options are, and then help me access that. Too many of our kids don't even know what all of the options are that are out there. I mean, I think about when we talk to kids about careers, even as early as kindergarten, we're like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? They'll say, a doctor or a nurse or a teacher or a fireman or policeman, all very noble careers. Now, you and I both know the likelihood that 100% of those kids choose ultimately those careers is, next to none. So it is important that we expose kids to what all they can see beyond what they can see, if that makes sense. When I mentioned community, I would say two things. Like, one of the things in my job now that I do is, I do a lot of presenting panels, public speaking, on behalf of the organization. I got my beginnings in public speaking within my community through my church. When I got to high school and how, kids take, mass communications or something, or oral communications, I'm like, I don't really need that. I've done that, right? The other piece for me that was so helpful was one of these things that I'm, really focused on is advising in K-12. So we do guidance counseling, and a few schools are really starting to try to connect that to the, the long game of careers. But it was people in my community that gave me advice about like career options and, oh, well, if you choose this major, know that you got to also do this, right? And I didn't get that explicitly within my K-12 experience, though I had a very good and solid K-12 experience. It was these other elements and other resources and supports that were brought in to help me in my journey.
It sounds like community Tequilla at an early age supported you, and you named a few things. First, in having high expectations of you, even though it wasn't, you need to go to college and you need to be a doctor. Just having these, we're going to be something great. Yeah. And then second, it's this idea that beyond academics, there are other skills, such as public speaking, and getting to do that at your church, so that when you actually delivered speeches in high school and college, you're not petrified like most of us. And then the third thing you mentioned is, incredibly, you applied to 2 schools, University of Arkansas and then Yale. I'm curious, this idea of Ivy Leagues, because you're in education and so am I. And we talk about it, or we hear this myth, or we hear this idea that you don't have to pay the big costs to go to college, these brand name colleges. You can go to a lesser known college and you'll get the same outcome. How does that play out with you?
I would even go so far as, Analiza, to say not everybody has to go to an Ivy League. Not everybody, frankly, even has to go to college. I mean, if we look at the future of work and what education is actually purported to be, education should be the great equalizer, meaning it exposes and gives all kids access to opportunities and choice to be like viable and successful, right, in our world. I truly believe that there are multiple pathways for kids to access choice and escape, poverty, and to be, upwardly mobile. And so I mean, a couple of examples, I would say there are lots of initiatives and programs now that sort of help either kids or adults without formal degrees catapult into, decent paying jobs. And so, and we see it obviously in like some of the tech sector, Google and Amazon, right, that they were no longer requiring a bachelor's degree, but we're starting to see it even in other industries and in other sectors. So in some ways that may look like, apprenticeship or work-based learning. And I want to be clear that this doesn't mean I'm trying to say, let's go back to the old vocational school model. You and I both know that was inherent with, racist policies and tracking and things like that, where adults make choices for kids based in large part from a biased perspective. But I also look at the future of work. And as we think about where jobs are now and where they're going, it is interesting that more and more jobs will require skills that you sort of get within the context of work and of industry. So for me, this is about, sort of breaking down those, false concrete walls between K-12 and industry. For some kids, there is the need for and I will say sort of formal institution of post-secondary. For others, it's skills and, competencies that, frankly, let's be clear, they could pick up either from the industry, or we should be thinking about them getting those even within K-12. So for me, I had a wonderful experience at Yale. For me in my career, it served me well for the path that I was choosing. Not all kids need that. Now, if kids want that, they should be able to access that. If you got to think about the ROI, if we encourage all kids, oh, you must go to college, especially these, highly selective ones, some are doing a better job at minimizing debt, others not so. What's the ROI there? So it's like if you could have gone straight from K-12 into a decent paying career, and then maybe you would hit a bump up against a wall, right, where you couldn't move up farther without a degree. Lots of companies have educational benefits. So I just feel like we have this linear model, and you and I both know career paths are anything but linear.
There are so many other paths that this doesn't have to be the only path to becoming, if you want to be CEO of an organization. And I want to deep dive into this idea of myths, because sometimes with myths, and you mentioned it earlier, I need to get the grades, or when I have the tech skills, I'll be set up to thrive and ascend in my career. So I'd love for you to name, when you were young or even in your earlier part of your career, Tequilla, what myths came up for you that you found later were completely bunk.
One of the ones that for sure comes to mind for me is sort of this myth that I just stated, that career paths are linear. The generation before us, careers may have been more linear, right? Where it was a little bit more straightforward. You finished school, maybe got a post-secondary degree, or picked up some type of trade, and then you worked and stayed there for 30 years, right? And so for me, one of the myths I would say that was for sure debunked early on was that didn't have to be my path, that I could figure out as I went what I wanted to do. The key was making sure that I was adaptive enough to continue to learn and grow.
Can you share with me maybe one or two defining career moments that really helped you to be where you are today?
One of them, when I was in undergrad, I was majoring in psychology, and my advisor talked to me. We were talking about what I wanted to do. And at that point, I was like, oh, I'm going to go get a PhD in psychology and, go from there. My two things happened for me my senior year of undergrad. One, unfortunately, my mom passed of breast cancer. And so that sort of made me just rethink, oh, am I really ready to go do this, 3 more years or 4 more years, right? Straight through. And then the other thing, I fortunately had a, thoughtful advisor who had gotten to know me in college well enough to know that I'm not quite sure that's what you like. That degree is going to set you up for what you want to do, right? Because I think he helped me interpret that maybe it was going to be a little bit more limiting, and that maybe I need to do a little bit more exploration, right? And so I ended up not doing that. I actually applied to Teach for America, got accepted, and was going to do that, but then just decided sort of mentally, given my mom passing, I was like, I just want to go be around family. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go home, find a job, and figure out, where to go, what to do from there. So that was for sure a key moment. And I raised that up because sort of having that thought partner and that self-awareness to be okay with, okay, I don't quite yet know. And that's okay, because you don't have to have all answers in the immediacy. Another critical event, I would say, happened for me in graduate school. At UT, you had, in social work at the graduate level, you have to do an internship, basically, clinicals. So I actually interned for the person that was the regional head of the Department of Human Services for Tennessee in the western part of the state in Memphis. And my cubicle was right across from her office, and she actually was a Black woman. She was on a call, her door was open in a meeting, and she literally sort of respectfully pushes back against one of her white male peers, and then proceeds to invite him to get off her phone and hung up the phone on him. I'd never seen a woman, let alone a Black woman, sort of take that approach with certainly a man and a white man. And so I remember debriefing it with her. I'm like, what was that about? And she just said, they were having their peers, they were having a conversation about a strategy or a decision and how to move forward. They respectfully disagreed. And he took sort of a patriarchal approach and mansplained her, and told her all the reasons and ways and why she was wrong, when and not necessarily in a productive way. And she decided to stand her ground and hold her own as a woman and as a Black woman, and disengage from the conversation that was no longer productive. And the reason I cite that is just a really critical moment. It was so empowering for me to see that she gave herself permission to take control of a situation that she found herself in. And so I have found myself during my career being unapologetic about, obviously I'm a great collaborator. I'm a middle child. So I love, building bridges and working with people, but also having the courage of my convictions around my presence, right, if you will, as a woman, as a Black woman, in situations where I might be alone. in my identity.
That is so powerful for you just to share that, because I don't see that really often. And to see that as a young professional, so empowering to then stand in your own power, to know, I, as a Black woman, can stand for myself and stand up for myself. Yeah. And it's okay. I'm going to be okay. So I love that. And I also love that you took time and space. Often we're hurrying to the next thing, and rather than listening to our heart and our values, to spend time with family. So powerful to hear you share both, giving ourselves permission to stand for ourselves, both in time and space, and also respect.
From my own experience as a woman and as a Black woman that I have certainly experienced in my own career, at Yale and in psychology, they were, really serious about like the research aspect of psychology. I remember doing a study about, it was about communications, but it was sort of at power. And what I did, I actually sort of observed several classes at Yale. I actually watched the times that females versus males led with what I call qualifying statements. Females, open with, well, I think, or maybe. They'd always put this qualifier on their statement, right? Versus sort of being clear in their convictions and validating their perspective themselves, right? It's almost like you put that qualifier out there, and then if it was accepted or rejected, it was less risky. So I always sort of had that in my mind, knowing sometimes I'm going to be, wrong, ill-informed, but sometimes I'm going to be right, spot on, and bringing, a valuable contribution. But if I never bring that because I'm too afraid to voice my perspective and experience and bring the fullness of that to the table, that I have no business being at the table.
So Tequilla, you shared a couple critical events, these defining career moments. And I want to then also take us back to perhaps another critical event, maybe that rock bottom moment, maybe a mistake or these types of failures, not our proudest times, that just really shaped us. I'm wondering if you could share one with us.
Probably my most rock bottom moment was in my last job at Memphis City Schools, doing some reform work around teacher effectiveness and teacher quality. Basically, it ended up resulting in sort of the district I worked in Memphis, the big urban poor district, merging with the little bit more middle class, affluent county, more suburban district. Merging two districts of two different identities, if you will, was a pretty monumental task. This was in Memphis, that is not without its own share of, history, legacies of, racism and things like that. And so during this process, it became, obviously needed, right, a focus on how to merge these districts together. What it did was sort of really distract from the work we were trying to do, to really focus on kids and via teacher effectiveness. So it shifted from the work that I love, strategizing around, where we needed to innovate, what we needed to change, like literally the work, to more of I don't even want to just call it political, because I'm not afraid of, everything is political in some sense, big P and little p, but it became focused on power between adults with an undergirding presence of race bias. People with choice, i.e. more affluent parents, let's make sure that they want to choose the merged district. I was no longer gratified. It was hindering the work. And so I had to make the very difficult choice to leave, knowing that the work was not done, taking their toll on me personally and professionally. I like to say that my grandparents, who you heard me say raised me, my grandfather was born in 1910, the heart of the Mississippi River Delta in Clarksdale, Mississippi. And I grew up watching my grandfather as a man sort of say, yes, sir, no, ma'am, to, the 12-year-old white male. And so what I said was, it was as if it was the first time in my life that I felt like, oh, this is what it was like for my grandfather. Like I almost felt like I'd been catapulted back into the Jim Crow South. Not that, there still isn't, in present day, obviously, legacies with that, but it was the first time that it was so in my face in that way that it was hindering me from not only doing my job, I would say, but feeling gratified and sleeping at night. So I made the decision to leave the district. I described that it was definitely a rock bottom professional point in my life, but it was the right ultimate decision for me.
Let's spend time here, Tequilla, because we're both very mission aligned and care deeply about kids. And at the same time, there are environments where we can have more impact and flourish. And there are environments that it saps us and we don't show up as our best selves. And I feel that this happens from my personal experience in education and in nonprofit, and they work with meaning. So I want to start to dissect this, because while there's guilt, and yes, it was rock bottom and that the work wasn't finished, how can we provide some guidance or consider these 5 things, for example, or here's a scorecard, or here's some guidance to decide that it's hard, but decide to leave?
I definitely want to sort of send a thank you card to that moment because it for sure catapulted me professionally and personally. The thing I would say is the step 1 is to have the self-awareness that you have choices. So for me, the first step was, okay, I've got to be confident enough to know that I do have a choice here. And the reason I say I want to sort of anchor here for a moment, Analiza, is that otherwise you would act out of fear. Like you would be whichever decision, right? You decide, wherever you decide to do, whatever decision you make, it needs to be guided by your beliefs, your values, what you want, not as a response to fear. And so the reason I say that, because, I'm before this moment, I was thriving, it was in a difficult, right? District life is difficult. Let me be clear. It's not like it was before sort of the merger stuff, but it was hard work, but it was gratifying. I felt like we were achieving some things, making some progress and focused on the work, right? But I did have this oh, well, if I don't do this, can I go somewhere else? Will I land in a good job? Will I find somewhere that is mission aligned where I can do? So I had to put all that aside and stand in the confidence that, you know what, if I were, 20-year-old male white, I wouldn't have that doubt. I would know that I, can add value and that someone else will recognize that. So I had to abandon that fear and that, maybe call it a lack of self-confidence. Just to name it. So that was the first step. Then the second one, I actually did this went on for months, for probably 7 months, where I said, sort of came to the point to ask myself, for me, I am so fortunate and so blessed that because my work aligns, my personal mission aligns to my personal mission, it doesn't feel like work. It's like, oh my God, I'm getting paid to do the thing that I want and would love to do anyway, right? I have the luxury of doing it while being able to provide for my family. So that matters. The second piece though of that is, okay, am I feeling gratified? Am I feeling like I'm continuing to learn, grow, et cetera? One of the things that I tell all of my mentees is never work for a person or an organization that you don't feel has your best interest at heart. And the reason I think that really, well, think about it, because if you don't, you're always in the back of my mind, you're actually not going to be able to really focus on the mission. At the end of every day, you're wondering, are they going to do something to me? Is the manager going to do something to me? You need to work in an environment that you have absolute confidence. My manager and this company has my best interest at heart. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can work in a mission-driven organization and environment that also wants to see you thrive as a human being. And that is what I found at TNTP. When I first came, our CEO at the time used to ask me, because I was just so full of joy and just so, happy. And she was like, did they beat you at your former job? And I'm like, almost, right? But that is what has kept me at TNTP for 9 years. I've continued to grow and learn, all while, serving a mission that I wholeheartedly believe in, but being able to do that in a context where I have absolutely believed that every manager that I've had at TNTP and the organization at large also have my best interest at heart. So there is mutual benefit for me as an employee, as a woman, as a Black woman. I'm able to bring all of that to the table. Not that becomes the focus of the work. No, it's just that I'm doing it. I have the psychological and personal and mental and emotional safety to just focus on the darn work.
So I want to put a stamp at these things because, one, to have self-awareness that this is not the right fit, and that your belief in yourself that you will land in a place where you can serve, that first step, self-awareness and confidence. And the second piece is that you can find a place where people care, where you can do the mission and serve kids and also care about you. Sometimes it's like not about the adults, not about the adults. You can't focus on the adults. And I'm like, well, can you care about your adults and also get the mission done?
You actually can't tell me that you authentically care about kids if you don't care about adults. Kids are nothing but future adults. And so if in your values and actions, you can't demonstrate to me care for adults, I don't believe you when you tell me you care about kids, because there's something about like, oh, the babies and it's easy to say that. But again, babies have baggage too. Kids, the kids are bringing the trauma, their lived experiences, right? And all those things to the table. They're going to be adults. So if you haven't learned to be effective at working with both your peers within the organization, but even thinking in a more asset-based way about the adults and the parents and families of the very kids that we're serving, I just don't know if I believe you wholeheartedly when you tell me you care so much about the babies.
I'm so happy to hear you say that. It feels sometimes like blasphemy to say, let's care about our people. And if we care about our people, they'll take care of the mission. It's in the military, we hear that, take care of your people and they'll take care of you. And sometimes in education, you're like, oh, you're a bad leader. How dare you think about other adults when we're about the kids?
They are not mutually exclusive.
Yes.
Like that's just what, I mean, we behave as if they have to be, and they're not.
All right, let's move to you being CEO, Tequilla. Did you set out to be CEO? What happened? That I know you were executive vice president and you had a great tenure there, but how did that happen?
I had no sights on being CEO of TNTP. That was not where I entered or why I entered the organization. What I found at TNTP, we sit at the intersection of practice, research, and policy, right? And so, and now, advocacy and community work. And so as you think about that, it's like, oh, wow, it just resonated with every part of me. So you hear about my experience. It resonated with the social worker in me. It resonated with the policymaker in me. It resonated, with the researcher in me. And so I, during my tenure and time at TNTP, have served in roles that have sort of pulled on each of those, and sometimes simultaneously, right? But I just have continued to like grow and grow and grow and in even, other ways as well. So, a few years ago, as you can imagine, we started, talk about succession planning, and then I was like, oh, I don't know if I could do that. I'm like, look, I love the organization. I'm just happy to be here, right? So over the next couple of years, continue to have conversations about my own aspirations and career and all those things, and just started getting a little, very slowly, Analiza, a little bit more comfortable that, maybe I could. So probably a couple of years ago, I actually told my CEO, I actually think I could. So help me, like what else should I be doing and thinking about to be ready? Not that it would be a given, right? But so that, were the when, because, our CEO was clear, I'm not going to be here forever, right? So when that time came, that it would be a viable choice if I wanted it to, right? My manager actually, I switched roles from more of an external sort of leading some of our consulting work to more internal, leading our strategy, policy work. And I'll be transparent with you. This is my first time as a CEO. I couldn't imagine doing that as successfully in an organization that I was brand new to. I mean, there's obviously always going to be a learning curve, even for me, even though I've been with the org for 9 years, still from this seat, you just get a different perspective.
I'm hearing a deliberate decision to say, maybe me. Can I be a possible contender? And having a conversation that sets you up to get the experiences so that when the time came, you would be an option.
I want to be clear, it was both my manager and me, my manager seeing in me and
Mm-hmm.
me seeing in myself. Right. And so there's something about like finding that balance of sometimes I feel like organizations will tell their teams, oh, you need to be the driver of your own career. Yes, that's true. But I do believe a good leader also has a role in developing and helping guide, right? You're sort of mentoring that person. So for sure, me and our former CEO, Dan, we had a partnership, I would say, in my development and in my trajectory. And I was just so appreciative of that.
I want to ask you about sacrifice because it's real. And I'd love for you to share, in your family, what have you had to sacrifice and how are you able to still protect you?
So I have a 12-year-old son. You mentioned military. His dad, my ex-husband, is retired military. So, but I'm, now, raising him, but my son is 12 now, fortunately. There certainly, when I look back, there have been times when I wasn't, I missed the field trip. It's like, oh, mom, can you, serve as a chaperone? It's like, I was name some random state, working, it's like I couldn't. What I am doing now is finding way more balance. So I was asked, recently to speak at something that's going to be his first day of school. And I just had to tell them, you know what, I can't do it. I know that it was, going to be a great opportunity to, represent the organization. But in that instance, I chose my son. And so I try to be very mindful that I can't every single instance. There have been times, and there will be more, that I do sacrifice, right? And I'm not there, but I also am equally trying to be more intentional about, what? And there are going to be some times when no, I'm going to sacrifice work, right? And be there for my son or for my family. The other thing I would say that helps me a lot, I have a tremendous support system in my external my extended family. And so we all live within, I don't know, maybe 45 minutes of each other. My sister, 2 aunts, 2 couple cousins. And so we support one another and help each other out, with all the things that helps so much as well. And then the only other thing I will say that I have done, I've started practicing this actually since becoming CEO. I like to travel, whether it's big or small. Sometimes some I travel with my partner, some I travel with my son or my family, whomever, right? But I like to do trips, mini trips, big trips. So one of the things that I do, I keep one on the books. So what that means is for example, my college reunion was in June. So my partner and I went up to New Haven, hung out with friends, had a wonderful time. So, a little mini vacation. We're doing a family trip in July, with my son, extended family. So looking forward to that. My point is, whenever I go on the one, so by the time I went to New Haven for my, time with friends for that weekend trip, the July one with my family, it was already booked, set in stone. So by the time when I go do the July one, I've already booked the next one. I'm going to the Caribbean. So you get what I'm saying? So it makes it where I always have something concrete to look forward to, because that's my thing. For someone else, it may be whatever, but the thing is to be very intentional in planning. Again, whatever it is, but just plan, put it on the books, book it, mark your calendar so that you commit to yourself. And that's how I'm doing self-care right now. And I have so much energy and joy as a result of it. There have been times in my career when I felt like, oh my God, I don't ever feel like I'm off work. I do now. So that practice it's really helping me a lot. So I tell everybody, figure out what the thing is for you and keep one of those things, whether it's a walk, but whatever it is, keep it on the books. Keep one coming up for you.
Keep it on the books. May we all do that in education, because we need leaders who show that by actually prioritizing Tequilla, you are being a better leader for all of us. So
Totally.
thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, let's go lightning round, starting with chocolate or vanilla,
Definitely vanilla.
cooking or takeout,
Take out every day.
climb a mountain or jump from a plane.
Neither.
Have you ever worn socks with sandals?
Of course.
How would you rate your karaoke skills, scale to 1 to 10, 10 being Mariah Carey?
Ooh, not Mariah Carey. 6.
What's a recent book you read?
The Sum of Us by Heather McGee.
What's your favorite way to practice self-care?
Massages.
What's a good professional development you've done?
I was accepted to Pahara Fellowship, and I had my launch for that. Phenomenal, for sure.
What's your definition of a boss mama?
A woman who takes care of herself in order to have a great impact in the world.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Relax a little bit.
And where can we find you? Like LinkedIn or any social media?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Tequilla Brownie, Facebook, Tequilla Brownie, Instagram, and Twitter, all Tequilla Brownie.
Great.
I don't have a fancy handle for any of those. It's just me, right? Tequilla Brownie.
And do you have a final ask, recommendation, or any parting thoughts to share?
I think maybe I'll end with where we were. Like, my final thought and recommendation is have self-awareness about like what gives you joy and energy, and work relentlessly to make sure you have that, as equally as relentlessly that you go for it in the mission and in your work.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tequilla.
Thank you.